Good morning, everybody. We are going to hear in a minute from Rebecca Calder, who works for Sizewell C Limited, who's going to tell us a bit about the tourism fund. And there is going to be a moment after that for us to ask her some questions. We're going to have about 10 minutes for questions. I think those of us who have been involved with the organisation for a number of years will know that between 2018 and 2022, we spent a lot of time worrying about the potential impact of Sizewell C and the other energy projects on tourism and the visitor economy. The DMO spent time and resource trying to measure that, and the findings of those reports were put into the mix when EDF Energy and the local authorities negotiated this tourism fund. In July 2022, Sizewell C got its DCO, its Development Consent Order. So that is now in place, and as I understand it, it's now down to whether the funding comes together as to whether Sizewell C goes ahead. That's sort of above our pay grade at this point. The tourism fund is now set up. I think it is our role now to try to make the absolute best of it. We're pleased that the DMO has been asked to join the working group to come up with some creative ideas that hopefully can mitigate the impacts of Sizewell C on the visitor economy. And we've all got a part to play in coming up with creative ideas to make the best of where we are. I'm really grateful to you, Rebecca, for coming to the platform to speak to us. We know you are not Rishi Sunak. We know you are not the Secretary of State for Bays. We know that you are not a director of Electricité de France. But thank you very much for coming to tell us about the Tourism Fund. And we're going to have some questions after we hear from you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Rebecca Calder. I'm the Community Environment Manager for Sizewell C. So I sit in the DCO team, that's the planning team, the team responsible for getting the development consent, putting the deed of obligation in place, and now sitting on the working groups, making sure that we deliver what we've said we'll do. And thank you for inviting us. This is a really good timing for us, so it's really good. I'd like to just give you an update on the project, where we are, because you're probably starting to see some things happening, and also the opportunities to get involved if you would like to. So I'll start with the project update. Many of you will be familiar with Sizewell, but perhaps not all of you. So it's a 3.2 gigawatt new nuclear power station. It's being built to the north of the existing Sizewell B power station. So on the coast, just north of Sizewell Village and near Leiston. It replicates Hinkley Point C in Somerset, so it's basically units 3 and 4 of Hinkley Point C in Somerset. That has been under construction for several years now. That enables us to put in place a different funding model because we can reduce risks and costs on through replication. Once built, there'll be enough low-carbon electricity to supply around 6 million homes, and compared to generation from gas, save about 9 million tonnes of carbon a year. As well as the power station, there is associated development. So some of that is temporary, things like our park and ride sites, freight management site, temporary accommodation campus. Some of it's permanent. So probably the best legacy for the region will be a 2-village bypass around Farnham and Stratford St Andrew, but there'll be a variety of other highway improvements to improve road safety, such as the roundabout at Yoxford. There's also a new link road being built from the A12 down to the power station so that we can minimise use of the B1122, which is obviously used by Theberton, Eastbridge, Middleton Moor, but also a lot of tourists going across to Minsmere. So as Harry said, we got development consent in July 2022. I've put our website on there. So I'm going to talk about tourism today, but I'm aware that most people here are also living within the community. There's loads of community stuff launching at the moment, things like Sizewell Creative, which is our arts programme. There's loads of information on there about jobs as well. So if you've got family or friends who might like to get involved in the project or are looking for work on the project, then there's information on there. But there's also lots of other really nice bits of information, such as videos on badgers and the ecology we're relocating. There'll be information on archaeology coming up as well and things. So I would encourage you to look at that. So what are we doing so far? So in 2022, the first thing we started was what you can see on the right, which is our new wetland habitat creation at the north of the site for marsh harrier and other wildlife. The dots you can see on the screen is the reed bed planting. So that was finished sort of end of 22 start, and then the reeds planted 2023. We've been doing lots of archaeological mitigation. So the middle picture is a beaker pot. So that dates from about 4,400 years ago. We found lots of beaker pottery, lots of slightly earlier Neolithic activities showing that people were probably using the landscape during the summer, and then going back, we found ritual feasting pits and things, some really interesting stuff. We've also found some really modern stuff. So that is a World War II helmet. Part of Sizewell C construction area is a World War II training ground. So we found some really interesting things like graffiti on the trees from prisoners of war who were there, things like this helmet, also a lot of unexploded ordnance. So there's been a massive job to do to clear that. The ground is quite soft in some places as well, so there's a risk of it sinking. So it's been quite slow progress, but we are making progress. The other thing we've been doing is, I mentioned badgers just now in terms of the website. There is new habitat being created. The Sizewell estate is much larger than what we're developing, so we're looking to move ecology out to the edges, away from the development area. So lots of work going on with water voles, badgers, bats, all sorts, reptiles. Mentioned UXO and vegetation clearance as well. So tree felling, clearing the area of the site that we're going to build and construct on. We've also been building early site accesses, office accommodation. So anybody who drives through Leiston might have seen our early office accommodation going on to the land east of Eastlands Industrial Estate last year. That's nearly finished now. And this now is the sort of work you're going to see rolling out across the associated development sites this year. Okay. So 2024, we started the year by commencing the DCO formally. That means that rather than just being able to do the site preparation works we've been doing last year, we can now build the power station. And we are looking to start earthworks in the next month or so. So this is sort of proper start of construction. One of the key things is that this triggers the deed of obligation. So that's a £250 million package. That includes the Tourism Fund, which I'll come on to later. There's a separate environment fund and also money in the deed of obligation for the environment, so 100 million in total between the Environment Trust and the deed of obligation for the environment. There's resilience funds for RSPB Minsmere, for National Trust at Dunwich Heath, Pro Calder at Leiston Abbey, and a separate heritage contribution to the first and second Leiston Abbey sites. £23 million community fund. 22 million for employment and skills. And the working groups, such as the Tourism Working Group, which Harry mentioned, have been set up, but there's working groups across everything from transport to ecology, tourism, accommodation, health and well-being, basically every single topic you can think of, really. And I put at the bottom, I mentioned earthworks starting, but I put at the bottom the works tracker. So if you go onto our website, that link's there, or you can go directly through that link, but that will tell you what's going on. So if you drive past somewhere like our Wickham Market Park and Ride site or Darsham on the A12 and you see kit in the field, you'll be able to see what's actually happening there. That also looks forward, so you'll be able to see what's coming up. So, moving on to tourism, mentioned 12 million tourism funds. So, $1 million of that was released on commencement, and then there's just over 570 every year up to the 14th anniversary of commencement. So, most funds run until the end of the construction phase. This one runs into operational phase a little bit, just to give some transition as the project moves into operational phase. $500,000 of that's to go to promotional and marketing activities each year. The rest is to go to monitoring, so we can actually see the effects of the project in the region, and also whether what the tourism fund is being targeted on is effective and whether we need to change approach. I say we, and by we I really mean East Suffolk Council, working really closely with the DMO. As you know, Sizewell C are not tourism experts. We will sit on the tourism working groups, but we will rely really heavily on our stakeholders here. So the Tourism Fund sits with East Suffolk. They will have a tourism programme manager in place and a tourism fund marketing manager in place as well to support that. those roles will set out measures in an annual tourism fund implementation plan, and then that comes to the working group. So we have the DMO on that, we have Visit Suffolk, we've got National Landscapes, and sorry, I've left off your Essex on my slides, but I will change that. East Suffolk County, us, and the LEP. Obviously, the LEP is about to disappear, but we will be looking at whether we replace that role and how we do that. Sorry, there's rather a lot of words on this slide, but this is just to show you the sort of things that it needs to cover. So strategies and action plans, marketing and promotion activities, there could be capital and revenue investment in projects, support and enhancement of existing initiatives and activities, focus on sensitive landscapes, so particularly the national landscape, initiatives to complement and support rights of way and cycleways, monitoring and market research. And then this one is probably of particular interest, so provision of information on issues and perceived effects that might be concerned to potential visitors or deter potential visitors. In terms of the principles, so how it must be spent, it's got to mitigate potential effects of the project. So it really has to be directed towards East Suffolk, particularly the region of East Suffolk that's most affected by the build. It needs to be sustainable, so we're looking at things that are going to provide long-term benefits, not just one-off things that we can't then support the next year. It needs to be value for money. It needs to tie into what is already going on, so support what is already going on in East Suffolk and enhance that offer. There must be a measurable economic benefit for the region, and we need to not duplicate or conflict. It needs to complement other mitigation. So I mentioned there's that environment fund. We've also got in things like the transport fund, lots of money for things like cycleways and rights of way. So what we don't want to do is duplicate. And we will manage that through a delivery steering group, which sits on top of all the working groups, make sure that we are making the most of the money. Just moving on from that, so another commitment in the deed of obligation is that we would provide an accommodation management system. So this is a booking system for our workers to use. It's free for workers and it's free for people to register. We welcome any and all types of accommodation. The only thing we would ask is that it is good quality, that it is safe, and also that it complies with legal licensing regulations. So if people are letting a room to a worker, we would expect them to have a proper contract. We'd expect fire safety, gas safety to be in place. If it's an HMO, they need to be licensed. If it's a caravan park, it needs to have its licenses or planning in place. We don't want things popping up that haven't got that, but providing you or accommodation complies with those, everybody is welcome. There's a Suffolk Chamber of Commerce webinar about the accommodation management system on Friday the 2nd of May at 10 to 12. Which people are welcome to. It's fairly self-explanatory and there's a lot of Q&A on the website. So actually you could just go click on and get started straight away, but if people are interested, there is that webinar. The email address there goes straight to our accommodation coordinator. So if you've got any questions on the website, or if you are looking at something more strategic, so we've had a number of people approach us to say, actually, I've got a whole field here that I could develop. Are you interested? That's the sort of first point for those conversations, and we would then link in obviously to the council through our accommodation working group, our tourism working groups, to make sure that any proposals would fit the planning and licensing test. But that's the route in. As part of the accommodation fund rather than the tourism fund, there is a tourist accommodation element. It's not huge, it's £1 million for the duration. But it's there for things like grants, loans for accommodation providers, and also to support the council, so that if you do have questions about licensing or wanting to change things, that they are fully funded to do that, provide the pre-application advice for you. So the sort of thing might be if you've got a restriction on duration that you can let accommodation for, or you have a site where you have to close for a certain amount of time a year, those are the sort of things that could be varied to how Sizewell C workers. So yeah, just get in touch if you're thinking about that at all. So how to stay informed, particularly in terms of accessing things like the Tourism Fund or the accommodation. So the Tourism Programme Manager and Marketing Manager, once they're in place, their job is very much outreach. So they should be coming out to people to promote the fund, to engage businesses and organisations, talk people through how to apply for the fund. However, it's obviously hugely helpful to them if they know who you are and if you are interested. The DMO is absolutely the first point of contact, so I really would encourage people to sign up, retain membership, because you will hear of these things through the DMO. East Suffolk Council have kindly provided a website, an email address where they can be contacted. So that's their economic development team if you've got any questions. We'd really encourage you as well to sign up to the Suffolk Chamber of Commerce supply chain portal that they're running for Sizewell C. They will have lots of other opportunities as well. So the most obvious one is things like just venue hire. We do loads of things like meet the buyer events, and we're always looking for venues, meeting rooms, but there'll be much wider opportunities to get involved with things like operating the campus, catering, that sort of thing. The other thing to say about the Chamber of Commerce is they're not just there for opportunities, and I don't know, Annie, hopefully this is the case with the DMO. We want to hear the bad stuff as well as the good stuff, because we've got the Tourism Fund, but we've also got a supply chain group and skills education supply chain funds. So we have a job service as well. So there's lots of ways if you're experiencing something like, for example, displacement of workers. If you're losing people, they're coming to work on Sizewell C canteens and things, we can address that through those groups. If you're worried about worker behaviour, if you are worried about workers sort of taking, I know, for example, Cakes and Ale at one point were worried about outage workers driving past their site. Anything like that, we have somebody to deal with. So we've got a community safety liaison officer who can deal with problems with workers or with traffic. We've got a traffic team. We've got a big community safety working group with all the emergency services. And as I say, we've got the skills funds, so they're working really closely with local colleges and things. So there should be a way to address it, but we can't address it unless we're aware. So please don't feel that you don't have any way into the project unless you want to be involved. We're happy to hear what is not working as well as what is working. So, one more. As it's a tourism conference, this is our very tiny contribution to visitors in East Suffolk. So I just wanted to show you a really quick video of wild alder. So I showed you on the slide at the very beginning the Marsh Harrier area. That is what Wild Oldhurst was back in 2015. So this is replacement habitat for a small section of the SSSI that we're using for our main construction area. So it was planted up and developed in 2015. By 2019, Marsh Harrier were nesting in there. And then as of last year, the habitat is well enough established that we set up the visitor routes and opened that up as a visitor attraction as Wild Oldhurst. There's a planning application in at the moment as well for a visitor centre, which will be for things like school trips and things. So I just wanted to show you, just a little bit of what Wild Oldhurst looks like. Okay, thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Rebecca. So now it's time for questions. We've got Shelley and Jess with microphones. Has anybody got a question, any questions for Rebecca or for me on behalf of the DMO? Nikki.
Thank you, Rebecca. Nikki Corbett from Leiston Town Council. Just on the accommodation, Rebecca, I noticed you say that the licensing has to be in place, etc., etc. Switching that the other way, do your contractors have to let you know where they're staying to avoid any unscrupulous landlords? Just thinking that, you know, maybe there's a register of where they're all staying, so that you keep tabs on the accommodation they're in.
So no, they don't have to tell us so we need an address for them, but they can give a permanent home address. We will be doing a workforce survey, so we understand what communities they're living, what type of accommodation they're living in. But if there's an issue with accommodation, we would rely on them to come to us, and we are encouraging that. There is a contribution for things like there's contributions for enforcement in the accommodation fund, but also for things like the fire service to do fire safety audits and things. So we will be relying on the workforce to report back if things aren't as they should be.
Yeah, and likewise, if you know something like that is happening, perhaps in your location, you'd want to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you know, obviously under the radar, as it were, but because that is a real concern for us very locally.
Yeah, and any feedback in as well locally or from residents, we would really welcome.
Thank you.
Do you need a microphone?
I was just interested to know. Oh, hi, I'm Sally Bassett. We have a tiny campsite called Sunnyside Campsite. I'm just wondering how many workers require accommodation, and is that how long is that for? Is it just for weekdays? Is it weekends? Is it semi-permanent? And are you looking for them? I'm just thinking about if they're interested in coming on to campsites, then where are the tourists going to go? And we only allow people to stay for 10 days, but if we're looking to accommodate workers for a week and then they go away for the weekend, you know, and that would absorb all of our season. So yeah.
So it's a 9 to 12-year construction project. There is about 500 people on site at the moment. That will probably go up near 1,000, 1,500 by the end of the year. We want to recruit as many people who live in Suffolk or can commute locally as we can, so what we call home-based workers. So it's obviously non-home-based workers who require accommodation. At the peak of construction, about halfway through, there's 7,900 people, of which a very conservative, about 2,000 to 3,000 will be local, so the rest will want accommodation. They definitely want caravans, and particularly the early works, so the civil workers, early civils like caravans. With the AMS, or the Accommodation Management System, you can put on what suits you. So you can put on, if you've got just winter availability, you can do that. If you just want to do weekday availability, you can do that as well. So it's whatever. People will come and work on the project from anything from a few weeks. So people who dug the Marsh Area Pond would have been there probably a couple of months. Some people will be on the project for 10 years. So it's really what suits you. But anything and everything we're interested in. The reason for things like the Tourist Accommodation Fund and the Tourism Fund is also to try and expand provision, and we can do that as well. We can talk to people directly about that, so that we're not displacing tourists, so that we've got Tourist Plus, so if people have got things like a spare field, but they need some money for more showers and toilets, that's the sort of thing we'd want to look at with people. So, yeah, the accommodation coordinator is a good person to speak to if you wanted to speak in more detail. Thanks.
Okay, Sally, does that answer your question? Yeah. Shelley's microphone's not getting a lot of action, but I think there's a hand up over here.
Hello. Hi, I'm Maria. I just wanted to know a little bit more about Wild Aldhurst. Is there a website that you go directly that just talks about Wild Aldhurst? And is there a visitor centre and that sort of thing?
So the visitor centre, there's a planning application in for a visitor centre and enhanced car parking at the moment with East Suffolk. I think we're making a few changes in response to comments, but that should be sort of coming up in the next year or so. All the information's on the Sizewell C website at the moment, so there's the plan, but also there's lots of little videos of things, and there's longer videos explaining how it was created. My colleague Paul Lennon, who is sitting on the Sizewell C stand behind you, will probably be able to tell you more in the break. He's more familiar with it and the sort of activities we're offering. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Dan.
Hello. Hi, I'm Dan, Horwood Farm. I stand around asking questions about Sizewell and green jumpers quite regularly. So it looks like you've got full go-ahead for everything, but you haven't actually got all the money and funding yet. My question would be, what happens if you don't? So, I mean, yesterday, small reactors got a bit of attention in the budget. Weifler got a bit of attention in the budget. What happens? Will you become a HS2 and something happens and we get, you know, what's in place if it doesn't work?
I actually meant to cover that because Harry raised that at the beginning. So the government and EDF will pay for Sizewell C. So that's already funded, we've started, it will be built. There's a capital raise process at the moment, and that is about, would anyone else like to come in as a private investor so that the government in particular can drop down its percentage? So the budget announcement yesterday that they'd bought the Wilver and Albury sites, if more people come in to support Sizewell C, they can pull more money out into getting those projects started. So you might have seen various announcements in the press from the government. They gave us lots of money to get started pre-commencement. We've had another massive sort of billion plus contribution. Now, I think the government is actually our majority shareholder now. So our investment team explained it a bit like a bus. The bus has started and it will go to its destination. There will be opportunities for people to get on along the route, and you know there is lots of interest from the capital raise. Some of those people will inevitably come in, especially because the regulated asset-based model is much lower risk than, say, the investment at Hinckley. But if nobody does, then it will be government and EDF funding it. So it's not a case of, like Hinckley, where we were waiting for a financial investment decision, and if we didn't get it, it wouldn't go. The fact we've commenced means that's it, we're building it. And, you know, realistically, there is no plan B in terms of energy policy. There isn't anything else low carbon lined up. We need new nuclear in the balance with other things, but we need new nuclear. So Sizewell B will be built. I hope Wilver will be built as well, and possibly another couple, because every time we build one, we do it better. And there is an advantage in terms of having lots of the same technology as well, in terms of sort of ongoing outage and things. So, yeah, but it's not a case of if we don't get the money, we'll stop. It's going to be built now. It's just a case of what percentage EDF and government will have in it and what percentage is private capital.
Okay, any more questions? Yes, there's one. Sorry, Annie, we're all right for time, aren't we? Yeah, thanks.
Hello, Judith Mobbs from Fire and Feast Suffolk. Rebecca, I wondered if you could tell us a little bit more about the timescales for the Tourism Fund and the appointment of the posts that you talked about, please.
So I might defer to East Suffolk, if I can, on that. Oh, there you are. Sorry. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. The roles and the Tourism Fund money rolling out. So when will a tourism programme manager and marketing manager be in place, and when will the money start to roll?
So I'm Paul Wood from East Suffolk Council. We went for a recruitment process earlier this year. So our tourism programme manager will be starting just after Easter, April the 8th, I understand. And we're currently working with the Tourism Working Group, which includes the partners Rebecca mentioned, to have some early rollout of funding. But ideally, we need to have a sort of a plan, an annual plan for the delivery of that funding, and that will be something that will be delivered by June. So we are sort of on a bit of a catch-up at the moment. This is the first year of many years. And once we have the implementation plan in place, that will set out the funding for the whole of this current year. So, yeah, that's where we are.
Thank you. But they're really important roles, and the DMO, the Suffolk Coast, looks forward to a very, very close working relationship with those two posts when they are recruited for. Any more questions? Yes, maybe this is the last one then. We'll be circulating the slides, won't we, Annie?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will be over on the Sizewell C stand as well if anyone has anything that isn't covered.
Thank you. Okay.
Hello, I'm Tina. I run a small, like the lady we've heard before, a small campsite near Wickham Market and some self-catering accommodation. I've actually got 2 Sizewell employees with me at the moment. My question is that I certainly hear a lot of rumours and talk about light pollution, noise. Is Sizewell C, and it's a big question, going to have an impact on our small businesses? Because each year I obviously invest and try and improve the business. I mean, is it worth me carrying on doing that? Or do you think it is going to have a big impact? Or do we see our campsites and accommodation perhaps now more open to Sizewell employees if the tourism is going to be impacted by Sizewell C?
So this was basically what we went through in the examination, so assessing what the impact would be. The whole point of the tourism fund is to avoid this. So at Hinkley Point, it's not the same market, but we have got a tourism fund and they haven't seen effects on tourism. Now, we don't know if that's because there would never have been effects or whether it's because the tourism fund is working effectively, but that is the job of the tourism working group now, and all the rest of the funding that's going in to make sure that there isn't an adverse effect on tourism. So, yeah, absolutely, we want tourism to carry on. Ideally, as I say, we'd like expanded provision, so our workers filling your gaps, the quiet seat periods, or winter, or going into expanded areas. We don't want to displace tourists. It's really important.
Annie, you want to join in?
Can I just, you don't have to, but just out of interest, because I hear a lot on the grapevine that that there are impacts happening already in terms of opportunities and problems. If you've got workers, if you're starting to see corporate guests, etc., and workers within your business, can you just raise your hand so I can just see an indication? So there are people here who are experiencing benefits from what's happening right now, and I think that's important to understand. But I also think that it's really important that we have potentially a couple of years before, and I am talking again from Annie's brain here, that we've got a couple of years before before construction really gets underway. And I think at the DMO, the way we see that is we've got a couple of years to really ramp up the profile of this destination, to bring more people here so that we have got more people in the pool before the major construction impacts hit. And I think that, we're all on this journey together. Some of us have done it before because obviously there's been Sizewell A and B, and there is some really useful historic information that we can use and go forwards with. But we are on the journey together. We are here for you as businesses, and we're going to do our absolute best. And we have got excellent working relationships with the people on the tourism working group and the council and what have you. So any problems, really do, please come and ask.
Great. Thank you. That's probably a good place to end. So thank you, Annie. Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
And you said you were going to be around.
Yeah, we'll be on the stand over
we
there.
will be sending out the slides. And I think, is it time for some more?
That's right. Thank you.